What's the worst thing your kid has done while drunk? I woke up to my son Andrew's bed empty, and his brother Eric passed out fully clothed, reeking of cheap beer. They'd both moved back home after college, and sometimes still partied like teenagers. I grabbed my phone and called Andrew, trying not to panic. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding exhausted and drunk. He said Eric had left him at Rosie's bar downtown, and he was walking home. That meant 3 miles through sketchy neighborhoods at 3 a.m. intoxicated. I told him to stop walking and share his location immediately. The GPS showed he was still a mile away on Madison Street near the abandoned strip mall. I threw on sweatpants and grabbed my keys. The streets were empty except for delivery trucks, and I made it to Madison in under 5 minutes. But when I spotted Andrew, he wasn't alone. 2 police cruisers had him surrounded with their lights flashing. 3 officers were standing in a semicircle around my son, who had his hands visible and looked terrified. My stomach dropped as I pulled over and jumped out. I could hear one officer asking Andrew where he was going and why he was out so late. Another cop had his hand resting on his weapon. "That's my son," I called out as I approached slowly. The lead officer held up his hand, telling me to stop. He said they'd received a call about a man matching Andrew's description, who was reportedly armed and having a mental health crisis. Andrew was wearing dark clothes and had been stumbling along talking to himself, which probably looked suspicious to someone driving by. They asked Andrew if he had any weapons. He hesitated for just a second before shaking his head. That tiny pause made every officer tense up. They told him to turn around slowly with his arms out. As he turned, I saw him trying to catch my eye with this desperate look that made my blood run cold. The lead officer asked to search him for weapons. Andrew agreed, but his voice cracked. As the officer approached, Andrew suddenly said he needed to tie his shoe. Every cop immediately stepped back and told him not to move. The tension ratcheted up to unbearable levels. Andrew stood there frozen with one shoe clearly untied. They told him to keep his hands visible and they would handle the shoe later. The search began, and I watched Andrew's face get paler with each second. When the officer patted down his jacket, Andrew made this small movement with his shoulder, like he was trying to shift something. The officer noticed immediately and stepped back, ordering Andrew to remove his jacket slowly. Andrew took off his jacket with shaking hands. As he pulled his arm out, something started to slide from inside the lining. Time seemed to slow down as I realized what was happening. Andrew tried to twist his body toward me, like he was going to toss me the jacket, but the officers were already shouting commands. "Don't move! Keep your hands where we can see them!" The jacket fell to the ground, and something metallic clattered on the pavement. All 3 officers drew their weapons, pointing them at my son. I couldn't breathe. Andrew dropped to his knees with his hands up, sobbing that he was sorry. The thing that had fallen from his jacket lay there in the streetlight's glare. It was a pistol. Andrew was crying, saying he'd forgotten it was there, and panicked when they asked about weapons because he knew he'd been drinking and didn't want to get in trouble. The officers kept their weapons drawn while one approached to secure the pistol. They ordered Andrew to lay flat on his stomach with his arms spread. I watched my adult son face down on the cold pavement while police decided whether to arrest him. The officer I'd coached with years ago looked at me with disappointment that hurt worse than anger would have. They cuffed Andrew and read him his rights while I stood there helpless. The charge would be carrying a concealed weapon and lying to police. His attempt to hide it and possibly pass it to me had made everything worse. As they put him in the cruiser, Andrew looked at me through the window, mouthing, "I'm sorry," over and over. I followed them to the station in my car, trying to figure out how to help him. This wasn't teenage mischief anymore. This was adult consequences that could affect his job and future. At the station, I called our lawyer while Andrew was being processed. The sun was coming up by the time I could finally see him. Andrew looked broken, sitting in the holding cell. He kept saying he'd just panicked and made stupid choices. The gun had been in that jacket for weeks, and he'd forgotten about it. Then he'd been too drunk and scared to think clearly. While waiting for the lawyer, I got a text from Eric asking where everyone was. I told him to get to the station immediately. When he arrived still hungover, I showed him the arrest report. His face went white. Then he said something that changed everything. "Mom, I planted that gun in his jacket tonight." Full story on channel link below.